Welcome to Board Games and Chill. My name is Marcus, and today I'll be telling you my top 5 board games of 2023. Starting off at number 5, I have Star Realms Frontiers. Now, Star Realms Frontiers is a standalone deck building game where you're fighting galactic battles, and it comes with a big deck of cards suitable for 1 to 4 players, and it's a very simple deck building game. And you can pretty much just follow all of the instructions on the cards, and that's about it. It comes with this tiny little booklet of instructions. And it comes with a whole variety of different game modes, from solo, cooperative, all the way to up to 4 players, and you can play in pairs, etc. And this game was probably the first deck building game I've ever played, and it certainly makes a great gateway game because of its simplicity. And the way in which the game works is both players start off with a small deck of very simple ships, and each round you play 5 ships, and the ships that you have generated resources from you can use to spend on any ships or bases in the marketplace. And then when you buy things from the marketplace, you add it to your discard pile, and then once you eventually reach the end of your deck, you then shuffle your discard pile back into your deck, and you have access to all of those new cards and bases. And the aim is to reduce your opponent's authority, or in this case health, all the way down to 0. And you do this by having cards which are based on their firepower, so you're constantly exchanging, dealing damage to each other, and so on and so forth. You can also have bases that allow you to protect your health pool, so they act as shields, but you also have both bases that are provide more utility, allowing you to gain resources and health each round unless they're destroyed. So each one has a different kind of function, and there are 4 different alien races, or kind of galactic civilizations, with kind of different focuses on their ship mechanics. And the idea is that when you build your deck, you're kind of looking for synergies and kind of balancing out either gaining back health, stripping your deck of unwanted cards, dealing damage, or gaining resources. And throughout the game, you might want to change some of your cards up depending on some of the new cards that you get and how quickly you want them to appear as you draw them. So I was actually given this game to me on my birthday, and Nick and I really enjoyed it. It was our first, and I think perhaps my only deck building game that I've played, and because of its simplicity and great galactic theme, and the games are only pretty short, 10 to 20 minutes each time, so you can pretty much quickly grab it and go without having to relearn the rules all the time. So we can take a long little break and just come back to it without having to relearn anything, because it's so simple. And not only that, because of its a number of solo and cooperative modes, when we don't feel like playing competitively against each other, we can just play cooperatively against AI, and it comes with a whole bunch of different AI scenarios, each with different kind of mechanics, each of which are all very fun to play. So that is Star Realms Frontiers, my number 5 game of 2023. So my 4th favourite game of 2023 was Pandemic the Cure. And Pandemic the Cure is a dice rolling variant of the original Pandemic board game, and also offers a variety of mechanics as well as kind of push your luck elements, which make the game quite interesting as well. So similar to the original, players take on a variety of different roles. They choose a role or kind of draw a role randomly at the beginning, and each role has their own special ability. But in this time, rather than just using it as an action, you roll a set of dice. So each role has their own set of dice, which is unique to them, and they roll it to determine the actions they can take that round. And some of the dice have an infection side, where if you roll an infection side, you increase the infection rate of the world. And the higher the infection rate is, eventually you'll end up losing. So you need to push your luck in the sense that you want to have the most optimal actions you can take that round to reduce the amount of infections, but there's always a risk that you might end up increasing it instead if you roll poorly. So rather than a map like the original, you instead have like this rondel that is split up into 6 regions, and instead of moving around the board, you can move across these 6 regions. And instead of drawing cards to determine which locations the virus hits, you instead draw from a bag of dice. And there are 4 colored dice, each representing one different virus, and the dice number represents which region it is placed in. So depending on the infection rate of the world, you draw a certain number of dice, and as you roll them, you can place them on the board. And just like the other one, if you have too many of the same virus on a particular region, there's a good chance that an outbreak will occur, and if you get too many outbreaks, you'll end up losing. And similarly, the only way to win is to cure all 4 diseases. So the original Pandemic board game was actually one of the first cooperative board games both Nick and I played together, and this variant is actually a recommendation from one of Nick's colleagues. And because we were really into kind of push your luck games at the time, like we were enjoying Quacks of Quedlinburg, and we also enjoying things like Zombie Dice, we wanted something that was also added a little bit more depth to it, rather than kind of just like having a less of a random element to it. So we recommended a Pandemic the Cure, which we've thoroughly enjoyed, and it's very simple as well. Like the mechanics are very, or the theme is incredible, just like the original, and very relevant from coming from the past few years. But if you want something a little bit more casual, or are just itching to play a particular kind of mechanic, but want to do something a little bit more thematic as well. So this is Pandemic the Cure, and it was my 4th favorite game in 2023. So my 3rd favorite game of 2023 is in fact a solo game, which was Witchcraft. Now Witchcraft was a fairly recent Kickstarter, so it actually kickstarted and arrived in 2023. So Witchcraft is a solo solitaire style game where you manage a coven of witches, and as this coven of witches, you need to try and appease 3 jurors who are kind of trying to decide your fate, whether you should be imprisoned or not. And you are trying to also appease this jury of people, of the villagers, and to kind of convince them that magic that you do is not evil and you're actually trying to help. And the way in which you do this is you draw a whole bunch of different witches and create your first starting witches deck. So you have one deck where is the witches you currently have available to you, and the other deck of witches are ones which you can potentially gain throughout the game. So you draw 3 jurors at random, and each juror has their own kind of specific mission based on their own kind of preferences or likes. So each kind of mission they have, it kind of ranges from easy, medium, hard, and it goes in that order. And as you complete one, you just progress to the next one. And each juror has their own set of enemies that you need to defeat as well. And each juror has a secret numbered card which tells you how many points you need to satisfy them, and you gain points by completing their missions. But you don't know how many points you need unless you use certain witches' abilities. So it can be beneficial to focus on getting witches and using their abilities to determine how many points you need to satisfy a particular juror, so you no longer have to focus on trying to do their missions. Because the idea is you need to try and complete as many missions as you want, really, until you think that you've satisfied the 3 jurors when you say, okay, let's go to court. And once you go to court, you then kind of reveal what the jurors want, and you count up your kind of score with the jurors, and you find out whether you win or lose. So if you can complete a number of different missions, then you've got a higher chance of being able to satisfy the jurors. Otherwise, it can be a little bit risky. So Witchcraft has a fantastic and very historical theme, and it's certainly portrayed absolutely beautifully in this game. And in terms of the gameplay, it offers a huge variability in the kind of different juror combinations you can have, because each juror has their own deck, the missions that you're given, as well as the enemies that appear in that mission that you need to defeat. And when you're drawing your initial Witch Coven deck, you basically have to draw 2 at a time, and you pick which one you want, and then the ones you choose go into your starting deck, and the others go into the deck of witches, which you can potentially draw from later on depending on some of the abilities you use. So there's absolutely huge variety of gameplay, and the challenges. It's really interesting because each game is very, very different, and there's a lot of room to build different strategy based on the kind of deck of witches that you get. Whether you want to focus on a balanced witches deck, or focus on power to do more or damage to the enemies to progress, or do you want to use your witches powers to look at the jurors, find out which juror is easiest to manipulate in order to get to a stage where you can potentially win. And there are a few different levels of winning and losing. So you can lose just by failing a certain number of missions. But you can also 2 different levels of winning where you convince all 3 jurors, which is the best way of winning, or 2 where it's kind of like you kind of win, and then 1 where you don't really win. So there's still, if you still can't get all 3, you can sometimes make do or pass off as a semi-win if you manage to satisfy two jurors. And they also have a campaign mode, which I haven't actually tried yet, but it's something that I really want to do this year because I really enjoyed the gameplay of this one, and the campaign mode kind of follows a particular number of different scenarios and follows a certain story. So that's also a very interesting mode, which I'm certainly very looking forward to playing. So that's Witchcraft, and it is my number 3 game of 2023. So my number 2 game of 2023 is this game called Nekojima. And Nekojima was also a Kickstarter that arrived very late into 2023. I think it arrived towards the end of December. And it is a dexterity balancing game. It's kind of on the same kind of veins as something like the classic Jenga. But in Nekojima, you're basically placing these telephone poles that are connected by rope, and you're rolling a dice to determine 2 different districts where to place each end of the poles. And you place these poles down in the districts wherever you want in those districts, and you to make sure that none of the ropes touch any of the other telephone pole ropes that have already been placed. And you can also stack them on top of each other so they can get higher and higher and more stable. And each round you actually draw these small little colored cubes from a bag to determine one of 3 different telephone pole or rope lengths. And this can very much change where you have to position them, and how you can, whether you want to have to stack them on top of each other, etc. So it can offer quite a bit of challenge, especially when you may not have that many potential positions to place them. And when you're competing against your friends, there isn't just one winner as such. There's only really one loser, who's the person who knocks down the entire structure. So when I mentioned when people draw from the bag to choose to get the color of telephone poles, there's also a chance that they draw a black cube, and these black cubes they basically have to give to one of their opponents, and then on their turn, after they place their set of telephone poles, they have to hang a cat, and this cat you have to hang on one of the ropes. So Nekojima is based around Cat Island in Japan, which is why it also comes with this fantastic little torii gate, and it's very nicely themed. So since this was the collector's pledge, it also came with this furoshiki wrap, which is kind of like this material, which they have some instructions in there where they teach you how to wrap the box up in this thing to make it a nice little neat parcel, which you can do as well. It also comes with its own kind of miniature custom dice mat and a whole bunch of mini expansions which offer a lot of variability to the gameplay. Things like slightly different cats with certain different wants or different rules with them. You also have a lantern where you've got to hang lanterns on the wires as well. There are some where you have to put small nests on top of the poles so that you can't place any more poles on top. And there are a whole variety of mini games which make it very fun. And you can decide how many you want to add. You can mix and match. You can just play with one of the expansions or all of them if you really wanted to. So Nekojima became a very fast favorite of ours because it's very quite simple to set up. The rules are very straightforward and simple and easy to learn, and it is just a bunch of casual fun. It's always a laugh when someone accidentally knocks down the structure at the end, completely unintentionally. It's always a good laugh, and it'll certainly be great when we have kids as well. And the wooden components that it comes with are very high quality, and so they feel like they're going to last quite a long time. And that is Nekojima, my number 2 game of 2023. So my number 1 game for 2023 is Eldritch Horror. Now, Eldritch Horror is certainly not a new game, but it has been bringing out a whole number of different expansions throughout the past several years. It had come up with 4 small box expansions and 4 big box expansions, and the big box expansions have their own kind of miniature sideboard that can really add to certain game scenarios. So Eldritch Horror is a game that is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos that he created in his novels. So players take on the role as an investigator, and they work together in order to defeat this massive ancient one that is threatened to take over the world. And so each investigator has their own unique stats, their unique abilities, that allow them to work together in order to defeat the Ancient One. And throughout the game, the Ancient One will open gates that spawn monsters and decrease this doom tracker as time goes on. And you need to try and complete these 3 missions before the Ancient One awakens. If the Ancient One does awaken, so when the doom tracker does reach 0, if you haven't managed to control the number of gates and monsters spawning, then some of the Ancient Ones are able to be defeated after they have been awakened, but it becomes significantly more challenging. But sometimes it might be the only way to defeat them, and often you either have to defeat the monster itself or complete a certain objective in order to defeat it. And as you play, you develop your investigators. You can improve their abilities, get item cards, and bring them up to a stage where they can actually start taking on some of these large boss monsters. Now, this game is not for the faint of heart. It is a very challenging game. There have been many occasions where we were right on the edge of losing before making a very lucky roll in order to actually win the game. So it is certainly very challenging, and every round there's always something that is bad that happens, and you're not really trying to manage your becoming really strong and powerful investigators as such. You're more like managing how you can actually survive and mitigate all the bad things that have been happening to you. And since each investigator has a kind of specific role within the group, one could be focused on defeating monsters, one can be focused on support, one can be focused on gathering clues, and another could be focused on closing gates. It's always very interesting having more players in the game, so you can actually make use of the wide variety of roles and investigators that the game offers, especially when you have multiple expansions. Whether you're playing with a group of friends, like 4, 5, 6 people, or just the two of us. So Nick and I mostly have just played just the two of us, and then we play multiple investigators each. So we first started with just playing as one each, and we found that it's very difficult because you don't really have any room to actually do anything except focusing on the mission. So certain investigator combinations are pretty much a no-go. Whereas if you're playing 2 investigators each, or even 3 investigators each, then you can actually make a huge use of the number of support characters that can really help improve your chances of survival. So Eldritch Horror we actually gifted to Nick for his birthday last year, and ever since then we were really hooked on it. And we had tried Arkham Horror LCG before. I absolutely love Arkham Horror LCG, but I didn't really play it that much in 2023. This year I'm probably going to be playing it a lot. But it wasn't really a game that Nick liked. He found it very, very challenging and difficult to the extent that he didn't enjoy playing. Whereas Eldritch Horror, on the other hand, was a little bit lighter weight. You didn't have so many exceptions to rules, and when you're drawing from the bag, it can be very, very punishing. And Eldritch Horror it's also punishing, but a little bit less so, to the extent where we actually really enjoyed doing the strategy and cooperativeness together without necessarily having that Dark Souls-y kind of feel to it. And when you have the whole board set up and the sheer number of tokens, it can look like quite a daunting game, but the mechanics are actually really, really simple. You only have a certain number of actions, and there are actually very few exceptions to a lot of the rules in the cards. And it's actually much easier to get the hang of than people might think. But the game can take a long time. Like if you play 4 or 6 investigators, games can easily take anywhere between 3 and 6 hours long. So you really need to have a dedicated a group willing to play that long, and then it becomes even tougher when you're trying to teach someone or multiple people who are new to the game all of the rules as you go on. Even though it's fairly straightforward, it is a lot to take in your first game. But I would certainly highly recommend it. I absolutely love it, and no doubt we're going to be continuing to play more of it this year with some of our friends. I think even though we have all the expansions, we have not defeated the bosses of the final expansion. We've defeated all of the others with just Nick and I playing 2 or 3 investigators each, but it's the final 3 or 4 ancient ones that we still need to defeat, and I think we will be doing that this year for sure. And the great thing, one of the things which I do love the most about this game is whether you lose or you win, I always feel that the experience tells a fantastic story. Whether it's all the hardships you get throughout the game, you could get extremely unlucky, but you can also have some fantastic comebacks that really make the game really worthwhile to play. It's one of those games where you often find everyone cheering at the end when you finally defeat the ancient one, when you have a whole line of rolls that have failed and the final one manages to deal enough damage to defeat the boss. And that is my favourite game of 2023. So although these were my 5 favourite games, I did play a lot of others, including some absolutely amazing games that I absolutely loved, but there were games where I just didn't quite play enough of to really experience the depth that I want before I can really make a really solid opinion on it. But there are certainly games like the Castles of Burgundy, for example. I played it a handful of times and I absolutely adored it, but I really want to play more so, not just solo, but also with other people, so I can get a really good feel for the game and what I think about it. Likewise with a whole bunch of others as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know whether you've played any of these games, or whether you like them or whether you hate them. And let me know if you have any recommendations as well that are similar to these games. I'd love to try some more, especially of the ones that I really, really like. If you want to see more from me, you can check out my latest video here. And other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.